When you use psychedelics, kind of as you get a little bit older, you put a little bit of miles in the odometer. I think they become very different behavioral entities than they did, say, when you were 16 or 17.
Mm.
There's no escaping your past. There's no escaping the behaviors, the relationships, the pain, the trauma, as well as the love and the joy and the being alive. But there's no escaping, the difficult things. And the relationship with psychedelics will continue to evolve. It'll
Mm.
continue to change and evolve and turn into something new when you least expect it or when you most need it. Who knows? But it's definitely nonlinear in that way. One thing that I've noticed that I think is a great achievement of the modern psychedelic movement is putting a lot of emphasis, so much emphasis, on the three kind of layered process: preparation, the journey itself, and integration. The methodology of all three of those things, all three of those kind of verticals, and how that kind of equates into a holistic use of the compound is so pronounced these days. And I think that is fantastic. I mean, even growing up the way that I did, we talked about set and setting, but, we didn't talk about preparation that much. There wasn't, not all that much, to be honest. And we certainly didn't talk about integration. And when I was writing my book, I was really, because I was kind of scratching my head and around the integration portion of it. And I had to go kind of see for myself. And I went back to all the kind of the classic psychedelic books of yesteryear, and really none of them mention integration. It's kind of absent from the psychedelic experience, from Stan Grof's early work, Politics of Ecstasy, Doors of Perception, LSD by Ram Dass, Richard Albert, Stanley Krippner, and all of these great books of kind of the counterculture use of psychedelics. There's really nothing about integration. So that is one huge win I would give our culture today. There's a lot of effort out there, and there's an incredibly robust amount of information out there that is easily accessible for everyone
Mm.
who kind of go on the internet, download, research, and find a great deal of kind of harm reduction oriented approaches to how to use these compounds. So that is fantastic. So what I'm just kind of proposing is that adding the third S, which is sustainability,
Mm.
setting, and sustainability. And sustainability is going into what we were just talking about, which is really integration. But in the simplest terms, it's how do we take each psychedelic experience and provide you with a roadmap and support and education to make each experience last as long as possible. And I don't mean last experientially last, I don't mean turning trips into, extended periods. I mean,
Being on a forever acid trip, for example, not what you're talking about. Yeah.
making the impact that it has on your life trickle into an everyday pragmatic approach in making your life better.
Sustainable change is what I hear you say.
Sustainable change, sustainable growth, sustainable reflection, and kind of sustainable awareness, encouraging each user to incorporate additional practices besides just the taking of the medicine that has you reflect on what it is that just happened. So you are combating your brain's default mode network, you are combating your nervous system, and you're allowing your heart and the brain and the neuroplasticity, all of it, to stay open and malleable to the changes that you just experienced. Now, granted, look, it doesn't last forever. Psychedelics, you eventually do have to come down. And of course, you're going to be hit with reality, and something very challenging might happen. And, the downloads might seem very distant, but I still think there are ways we can offset it. A great number of people who are coming into psychedelics for the first time are coming in for mental health implications, which is fine. We obviously know it can be very successful at that, but I do encourage anybody who's new to that to sort of pause and to understand the implications and to understand where psychedelics fit into your holistic healing paradigm, and that you aren't just headline surfing and you think that this is some kind of magic pill that's just going to cure your depression overnight.
Hmm.
And really, getting everyone just to kind of stop and look at this as a process and a practice just as anything else is. I think I'd bring it back to disinformation. A huge part of the current psychedelic movement, rebirth, renaissance, whatever you want to call it, is kind of an undoing of decades of misinformation. There's so much successful propaganda put out there as a result of the war on drugs that really created so much confusion around psychedelics that I think we're kind of just now kind of unraveling and setting the record straight. Nixon and Reagan's propaganda machine was very effective at creating generations long narratives around how these things don't work, but people think that is how they work. So I think it's a little bit of all of that. And I think lastly, what I encourage everyone to do is find community, find the others. You're not alone in this. More and more people are coming out of the closet and feel safe enough to talk about it. Almost every major city in America, in the Western civilized world, has a psychedelic society that's pretty thriving and active. And find the others, find the people, sit down, exchange ideas, exchange your experiences. I think one thing that does sort of concern me is the over commercialization of psychedelics, the over fusing and morphing of capitalism and psychedelics into them kind of being rolled out as sort of a product, if you will, a complete healing product.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Martha Stewart to come out with her line of microdose gummies or something. And I'm like, okay, we've turned into a funny direction.
It's going to happen. Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop is going to do it any day now. And, that concerns me a little bit. But for the most part, look, I believe psychedelics have survived humanity for thousands and thousands of years. And I think ultimately, and this is kind of a Terence McKenna thing, it's not an original thought, but psychedelics are going to laugh in the face of trying to be controlled and regulated,
1,000.
overly regulated. Of course, there needs to be a little bit of regulation, but overly regulated and controlled. So I'm curious to how it all shakes out. I really don't have an answer, but as we see it roll out to, larger communities and populations, it's going to be interesting to watch, man.